I think the need changed because the safety of congregate settings changed. And so while the shelter capacity may have looked like one thing outside of COVID, suddenly we wanted to spread people out. We didn't want illness spreading in that way.
Delanus has some emergency shelter, but I think it's important to remember that they weren't built for that. They were built as a small program to help people leave homelessness, and so they're filling in a gap that they were not created for, and it comes at a high cost.
The beginning of the pandemic, I remember it really well. It was very stressful. Incredibly stressful. We were having to increase our capacity when many others were decreasing their capacity. We did a vulnerability assessment really early on in the pandemic and found that 2/3 of our guests were at high risk for COVID. It was shocking, actually, some of the medical needs. Because of that, it was imperative that we opened up a lot of different sites. We partnered with a ton of different organizations to open up to 6 sites at one time.
Having Hilltop View available during the pandemic was phenomenal. A lot of folks were coming from shelters and or staying in hotels. It just assisted with a sigh of relief for folks to know that despite being in a pandemic, supportive services are still going forth.
It also allowed us to go back to the drawing board on providing services and how we could, so that we didn't stop. And we did not stop. We did curbside, we did orders over the phone for the food. We also did delivery. And so persons were still able to get bills paid. Persons were able to do intakes via Zoom. Things had to change because of the pandemic, but although change doesn't always feel good, it is often necessary.
I think the pandemic in some ways changed some of our focus. The good thing is it's pushed us, I think, more to network, like with other groups, Growing Hope, and so many food pantries closed. And so suddenly people were knocking on our door saying, I'm in a hotel, but I need food, or I'm camping and need food.
We have a couple of food programs. They've changed the way they deliver meals, so it's not just about congregate meals on site anymore, but it's also about going out to the senior centers or people's homes and delivering sack lunches or sack meals for several days at a time.
Actually, COVID brought a lot of resources that we had never seen before, and the amount of resources was higher. So we had more funding for rapid rehousing. We actually had more lenient landlords because a lot of students in the area were leaving their housing, so there were a lot of vacant units. We had more housing choice vouchers coming through and emergency housing choice vouchers coming through. There was a pocket of time for about 6 or 8 months where it was the ideal time to get folks into housing, and we were able to take advantage of that and really make some headway by housing over 100 people, more than double what we anticipated.
The most vulnerable people who are suffering and still suffering from the effects of the pandemic. The federal funding essentially ended in September of this year.
Not only has SARA ended, landlords are raising their rents, and we're hearing anecdotally that rents are going up more than 10%.
Who can afford that kind of increase? We're just bracing ourselves now for an uptick in evictions that we cannot prevent because there isn't the kind of funding that we need out there for it. The real root of the eviction problem is less about procedure, money that's available, and I'd say even legal help. I'll tell you, the real root of the eviction problem is the lack of affordable housing.